All right, so on to the show. I'm sure most of you know I live in the state of Nevada right now. My wife's from here originally, and I've grown to love it. And one of the reasons I really enjoy just not just Nevada, but the people here. But it's outside of Alaska. It's about one of the last Wild West type of states out there. It's got its problems. Don't get me wrong. It's like everywhere else, we're being overrun by California and and other liberal states. But it's like 80% of the land in the state of Nevada is public land, or depending on how you define it. Angus McIntosh will tell you it's not public land; it's grazing allotment. It's a fair point. But anyhow, for the sake of saying it, it's public land, and there's just there's a lot of things that would be illegal elsewhere that just aren't here. It just seems like it's not that big of a deal. Alcohol is available literally everywhere. I think you could probably buy some at church if you tried hard enough, and not even just a Catholic church. I think just any old church would probably do. But I can't verify that. And but anyhow, also depending on the county I live in, it's the case. But prostitution is still legal, just like it was back in the old West. And I even voted here in 2018 to not change a statute which would basically outlaw prostitution. I forget, it was some sort of way they zoned them or something, but it was basically going to kind of backdoor put them out of business, pun intended. And anyhow, I voted in favor of the prosties because man's got to eat, no woman's got to work, and that's kind of what I found out in this little bit of research. So I kind of like these little last minute historical episodes because I give you just a little more in depth than you might actually know, but still leaves a lot of room open to go back in and research it more. So that's kind of what I did here. So I asked y'all in the bull session here a while back about what historical episodes you'd like to hear, and one of them was how brothels prospered in the old West. And well, I can answer that in one sentence. They put girls where there were no girls, and that's how they prospered. And eventually, as civilization caught up, it's kind of the story. Well, still, even today, as civilization catches up, so does the laws, and goes ahead and ruins all the damn fun, don't it? And it's not a it's not a glamorous profession by any means. No matter how much Hollywood and whatnot will tell you it is, but man, those old gals, they had a rough go of things. And there was a handful, and it was not a very, less than 10%, I would say, made a pretty good go of it. Smart businesswoman, whatever. And for whatever reason, it seemed like in the old West there were not a whole lot of pimps. There was some security, a bouncer or whatnot, but there wasn't a whole lot of like just male pimps. There was mostly madams running these bordellos, brothels, whorehouses, honky tonks, whatever you call them. And it was pretty well the only, I guess, kind of livable female profession there was. And because of that reason, that's It's kind of the main reason most of them uh, went into it in the first place. Uh, there was a handful of people that interviewed later on. They said they sure enjoyed uh, you know they enjoyed being a saloon girl because they like to get drunk. They like to flirt and talk with the cowboys and the gamblers and have a good time. And they also made a little bit of money doing it. Uh, I guess the biggest thing I learned from this deal is, as always, Hollywood changes how things really were, and so every John Wayne movie or Clint Eastwood movie or any Western really, you always they walk into a saloon and they got a couple girls waving the fan. They got the vapors waiting for the men to come in, and they're all decked out and I guess they got the costumes pretty spot on, it seems like. But there was definitely a spectrum of whores in in the old West, and it was not, although they were everywhere, it wasn't as readily acceptable as you might believe. And after thinking on this thing and living in the state of Nevada for coming up on 4 years now, I'm kind of pro whorehouses. I think it's well, I'll get into that later. But anyhow, there was definitely a spectrum, and it ranged from the madam of a nice parlor house, bordello. They called them parlor houses because they were usually like a big fancy mansion kind of picture. I know it's an old movie, and I'd say I'm dating myself, but that movie was old when I saw it. But uh, my dad had it, and it's called The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. Dolly Parton, pretty famous movie, and kind of picture that as far as your parlor houses, because there's a big mansion. You walk in and you got the girls all lined up, and there's like big comfy couches and a bar, and it's just really really swanky and fancy on the inside. And that was about as top of the line as you got. They were a lot more expensive, obviously, but the girls all stayed in rooms there behind the main parlor. But they usually would feed you a meal. You had fancy cigars, good whiskey, really good anything. A lot of times they'd even serve champagne for your dinner, and they were just it was quite the ordeal, it seemed like. And these gals, they paid the madam of the house who owned it, and she stayed there with them. And it was kind of like sororities back before the sororities made any, or back when those sororities still made money, I guess. But you had your house mom or whatever, your house, your top whore, and she really only she only visited the men that she chose, and a lot of times you had to have an appointment, whatever. And then she'd parade out the girls whenever they'd have a caller coming in, and he'd take his pick, have a drink or so, and then they'd go out and do their business. And those girls would probably split the. Those girls were whores. They would not spit, unless she wanted them to. I don't know. I don't know how that worked. Probably hygiene wasn't real good back then. They are whores, so who knows? I mean, if it was me in that time period, I wouldn't be putting my mouth anywhere near there. But like I said, they're whores. I don't know. But they split the take for this little this little rendezvous, and they'd give half or whatever to the madam, and she would either charge them a flat rate for the week or the night, or she'd charge them by the guest. Either way, she's getting commission. That's what you call residual income, folks. It's a glorious thing, glory holest thing. I don't know if that existed back then either. But anyway, that was really like the top of the line, and those girls had a bouncer right there. So if any of the young buckaroos got a little too ahead of himself, they'd go ahead and get escorted out by their ear and tossed out in the street. And of course, most of these girls were armed as well. It was the Wild West. Everybody was fucking armed because, by God, you should be. And then it kind of went down in steps from there. Next up, and probably really the best off, I should say, as far as the prostitutes, the parlor house girls had the best. But as far as just the sporting girls in general, the painted ladies in particular were called saloon girls, and they weren't necessarily whores. And a lot of times they weren't, because they could make more money not whoring, just going and hanging out at the saloon, yucking it up, maybe rubbing up on a fella every now and then, making him feel good, and whispering sweet nothings and sharing a drink with him, and she would get paid as much as like $10 a week, and also get a commission for every drink she sold. And they they ended up they would get these little coins, or like a buffalo nickel or something, like those wood nickels, or like a shell or something like that made of bone. Anyway, a little token type deal, and every time their fella bought a drink, then they would go ahead and pass them one of those, and they could cash it in for cash later on. And when they'd get those, they would slip it down in their stockings. They had the fishnet type deals, and next thing you know, they'd get a bunch of those tokens, and it'd make their legs look all bumpy, and they called them the bumpy leg, which is a cousin to, probably kissing cousins to the stanky leg, I think. I'm a little confused on my lingo at times, but anyhow, they did pretty good, and they didn't have to go fuck a nasty mountain man. So they stuck around. They usually drank like cold tea or something when they got bought a drink, because whiskey was the standard, and so they didn't. Sometimes they'd get drunk. Apparently, Calamity Jane was a roaring drunk, and but most of the time they they didn't drink with the customers. They just took shot of tea or sugar water or something. And then there was the dance hall girls, which really was famous in California during the gold rush of '49. And they would hire these girls just to dance. That was it. They would start the music playing, and the dance would start at like 8 o'clock at night. And there would be what they called turns, and it'd be like 15 minutes, and you'd get, 3 or 4 dances, however long the song was playing. And you could, get your choice of a girl to dance with on each one of those songs during the turn, and then, the band would take a break or whatever. And whenever the song was done, whoever the gal was dancing with, she would lead him over to the bar, and she'd collect a commission off of that drink. And then she was on to the next dance, because the fellas, and especially in 1849 California, there was a lot of fellas. Well, there wasn't a whole lot of anybody, I guess, but of the people that were there, by and large, they were dudes, like 90% of them, and that's no joke. 9 out of 10 people in the state of California were dudes. So these dance hall girls had plenty of dance partners, and these fellas would pay from 75 cents to $1 for a ticket, and that would get you dances during one turn, so about 15 minutes or so, for $1. $4 an hour or $3 an hour, depending on the prices. And you would just, song would end, you'd switch partners, and they'd usually take you up to the bar for a drink, get your drink, go grab another dance, and I think that's how it worked. Maybe you just only got one dance. I don't know. However, they said the most popular girls would get like 50 dances a night plus commission on all those drinks, and most of the time they would make a pretty good killing on that deal. A lot of times they'd make more than the poor saps that came in to dance with them, which was pretty rare because women weren't allowed to do stuff back then. Back when we had our heads on straight, damn it. That was a joke. Solidarity with a woman or something. Anyhow, the women weren't allowed to do much, and most of the time they were married, stayed home with the kids, didn't have to, provide a living monetarily. They kept the home, raised the kids. But as was the case a lot of times, medicine wasn't too bueno. And something as simple as a common cold, or dare I say, the COVID, could kill you dead real quick because they had they didn't even have penicillin at the time, and penicillin takes care of syphilis and gonorrhea pretty quick. Apparently, I've never had it. Thank God. Won't be getting it now, and. But yeah, that shit could kill you back then. Nowadays you just take a couple pills, from what I understand, and yeah, you're good to go. But anyhow, they'd end up a widow or something, and a lot of times they didn't have any skills that could make them any money other than go just banging a dude and having him pay you. Because they've been at home all their lives or whatever. And just, it was a different time. The women, they didn't do much. They either got fucked in the house or they got fucked in the saloon. That's what they did. Back the way we liked things. Just kidding. Somewhat. And, so a lot of these gals just, they were, run away from home. They'd see a handbill or a flyer or something back east about, this glorious new life out west, and all you had to do was chat it up with the wild vaqueros and the cow punchers and the gamblers and all that good stuff, and you could make just untold amounts of money. Just think of old Lori Darlin back in Lonesome Dove with stars in her eyes, just ready to go to San Francisco, except. These girls hadn't even begun to fathom what Lori had gone through yet, but they were thinking of that gold. Well, you stumble your pretty little self off a train in Dodge City, Kansas, and you got to dodge a herd of cattle coming down the street headed to the railhead, and you got cowboys hadn't seen any type of civilization, let alone a woman, for, at least a good 6 weeks. They came in to shoot their guns off, figuratively and metaphorically. They was gonna blow some loads. And you stumble into the gambling house, and you're looking for your job, and then they tell you what's up. Hey, you got to pay us $3 a week or something like that. And if you're good and you hustle and finish them off quick, you can get 5-6 guys a night, and you can really make a pretty decent living. But you also got to deal with the sweaty, stinky cowboy who hadn't showered in 6 weeks, or ever, I guess. They didn't have showers, but they hadn't bathed in about 6 weeks, and hadn't seen a woman in about 6 weeks either, and they've been dealing with cattle day in and day out. Rank-ass horses traded for wet-ass pussy. You would hope. I don't know. Like I said, different time back then. I don't know how things operate. I'm sure the body still operated quite the same, but Boy, the sights and smells had to be a little bit different. And anyhow, it was not a real good existence for these gals. It was pretty tough, pretty tough. But but if they hired on as a saloon girl, a dance hall girl, they got, of course, got looked down on by the proper women of town who made even less than they did. But hey, they weren't whoring out, so they were top of the food chain. But then you go to the parlor houses. That was a step down because you had to go do the deed. Honky tonks were a little step down from there, and that was sounds like my kind of place. No subtlety at all. The girls were just hanging out there, and you might spend about 5 minutes at the bar washing the dirt out of your throat, and then it was off to do some diddling. When we get to Elko here later this month, I will make sure and take a picture of Inez's whorehouse there in Elko. Inez's dancing and diddling. One of the best signs ever made. Anyhow, and then it went down further from there. You had the girls that just hung out at the saloons and not the sporting houses, but just the bar. They'd hang out there and they'd go hooking on the side, and they usually had a little like a 1 bedroom apartment or cabin or something. They called them cribs, and these were a lot of times owned by the madam. Uh, all these towns had their red light districts, and they called them red lights because they'd put a red lantern or they'd put red curtains on their windows of the brothels or even these cribs. But a lot of times, the madams, when they'd get some money rolling in, then they'd buy a string of these cribs and rent them out to their older, ready to turn out the pasture sporting gals that they'd reached the ripe old age of like 27 and just pretty well used up, and but they could still make some money, and they just had to do it with a little rougher, tougher, nastier of a guest, and they had to do it outside the comfort of the brothel, which meant they didn't have any security other than what they had on them. So a lot of them would carry a dagger or a little derringer stashed somewhere. You have all seen the Western movies, but apparently that part was pretty true. And then from there on out, it just you had them, and I guess as far as what I read, most of these states prostitution was 100% illegal. There was a few Western states, but there was a handful that where it was a legal profession, but it was just kind of like, well, whatever. We got other shit to worry about. We got the Indians raiding us. We got climate. You had the Civil War that just ended, and you got a bunch of Southerners meeting up with a bunch of Yankees, and there's still bad blood there. So there was plenty of shit to worry about. And hooking just did not seem to be at the top of the priority. So these gals really did well for a little while, or at least the madams did, and then some of the smarter or the prettier or just more fortunate, just straight up working gals, they did pretty well, and then others obviously not so much. But you're talking at really from like St. Louis westward, there just wasn't anything out there but Indians and a handful of mountain men. And then there was San Francisco on the coast, and and then a handful of villages, all throughout California in the west. But there wasn't much there, and all of a sudden there's this big rush westward, and it's all men for the most part. In most places it was at least 3-to-1 men to women, and then like I said, there in California during the gold rush, you're talking 9-to-1. So any woman was a desirable woman, it seemed like, and and you got some doozies of characters that I read about, and one of them is a pretty entertaining story. So picture this gal. Um, Her name is Big Alice. Um, Big Alice Abbott. So picture the old buffalo heifer from Lonesome Dove. Just a big old gal, and how she got all of her money, I don't know, but apparently she was a little bit of a bully, and she owned a whorehouse there in El Paso, and right across the street from her was a lady named Etta Clark, and she also had a whorehouse. Apparently, it must have been legitimate brothels. They had a bunch of gals living there and whatnot. There's this one gal named Bessie Colvin. She's a little redheaded gal, which means I probably would have liked her. Um, she's working for Big Alice Abbott, and she owes her about $125 of back rent, and they're having this big old to do about it. It starts as a discussion. Where's my money? I ain't got your money. How the fuck do you not got my money? You've been banging all sorts of dudes here in my house. What you're getting paid to do. I know what's happening. Where's my money? And she's like, I ain't got it. Fuck you, Alice. And it turns into this big screaming match, out on the out on the boardwalk or on the street, something like that. And old Bessie, she's had enough, and she storms across the street to Etta Clark's, and she says, I'm quitting, Big Alice. I'm coming to work for you now if you'll have me. And Etta's like, well, I don't know, how's that puss? And she's like, puss is good. And she's like, all right, sounds good to me. Come on in. So she marches back over to Big Alice, and she's like, hey, I told Etta my puss is good. I'm heading over there. She stomps on out. And Big Alice was not about to lose that puss. And she comes storming across the street, and she's got a couple of her cronies with her, or her gals. And she's beating on the front door. Apparently, this Etta Clark was about the opposite of Big Alice, and she was just a little thing. And anyhow, Alice is beating on this door. Etta, she cracks it a little bit and to tell her to go away. In the meantime, Alice, she just she puts all of that big heifer right into the door, rips it off the hinges, smashes up Etta's face, and Bessie, redheaded Bessie, she's in the corner just quivering and shaking, and they from what I read, and I'll have a list of all these articles that I read today. I'll put them in the show notes. So, Big Alice grabs Bessie by the hair pretty much and just drags her on outside. In the meantime, I guess I left out a little part. Yeah, she smashes through the front door, busts Etta's face up. She's headed over there for Bessie, and Etta grabs what basically is like a long match, but it's like a big heavy like candlestick meets like a fire poker, and they used it to light gas stoves, but it was like a 2 or 3 foot long, and so she's waving it in Big Alice's face, and Alice just hauls off and whacks her right on the fucking nose, sends her flying. She stomps over, grabs Bessie by the hair, yanks her on outside, and meantime, Etta's wondering what the fuck hit her, and then she's like, oh yeah, it was that stupid bitch. So she grabs her pistol. She's got herself a Colt 45, and she walks outside and she shoots. And old Big Alice stops in the middle of the street, and she looks down, and she's got blood pooling in the street. And she's like, what the hell? And excuse me. And yeah, so she said, "Hey, what the hell?" Etta takes aim, shoots at her again, misses this time, but Big Alice, she gets back across the street. The sheriff gets summoned. Etta goes to jail. Ugh. And well, next thing you know, Big Alice, she recovers, and big headline in the newspaper: Big Alice Abbott gets shot in the public bone. And whether it was they misread, or it was a typo, or they just softened it up for the civil society, but the doctor's note said she had been shot in the pubic arch. Big Alice got shot right in the pussy, and I never did find out what happened to Bessie Colvin, if she went back to work for Etta. I don't know. Oh, but apparently it wasn't all that uncommon to have a couple competing madams come to blows. There was a story in up in Denver, I believe. Let's see if I can find that particular story. It was two different madams end up getting in a fist fight along the edge of the South Platte. That was it was Maddie Silks and Katie Fulton, and apparently they were all sorts of drunk, but also they it was super competitive. Those madams, they'd probably started off just giving a beach here and there, and next thing you know, they got some money rolling in, so they buy a mansion, and they got girls coming in. They send back east for girls and all the fine stuff to put in these establishments to keep them up. But it takes money to do all that, so they need them girls to work, put that pussy in action, and well, it was competitive. So if new shiny girl moved in and you couldn't throw down as many dicks as her, well, guess what? You got pushed out. Not pulling your weight around here, and down to the honky tonks you go. And then you get a little older, get a little uglier, whatever. Get a little more used up. You get a little more jaded by life, and you just kind of hate everybody. And understandably, I completely understand that, but it doesn't do well for business. So you get booted out of there, and then next thing you know, you're living in a crib, and you're instead of dealing with gamblers and politicians and cattle barons, you go from them to cowboys, and now you're dealing with some greasy old buffalo hunter. Or I guess the true worst of it would probably been the army horse, because the army soldiers made basically nothing. Most of them were probably convicts, and yeah, wasn't a good sight. And apparently those old gals that followed the army platoons around, they were a sight to behold, to say the least. But there was another. But anyhow, because of that, it was very competitive, and it was the Old West, and people did things a little different. So this one, it was in Leadville, Colorado. It was Molly May and Sally Purple. They were madams of establishments right next door to each other, and it was reported in the newspaper as the Battle of the Painted Ladies, and they decided to go ahead and have a duel over whoever's hometown was the better hometown, and apparently they were drunker than 9 Indians, and they couldn't hit shit, but they had a good old time, and everybody who talked about it was laughing. Once again, never did. I kind of like most whores in the Old West. I never did figure out what actually happened with them. So, um, yeah, it was a sad existence to say the least. If the Cowboys didn't beat on you, or some band of Indians didn't come in and raid town and steal you, next thing you know, you got the herpes, and which is fine. They can't really kill you at that stage. But then next thing you know, you got the clap, and that can kill you. And the the medicines that they're trying to cure you with are probably worse than the clap itself, because they're giving them like mixture of a bunch of shit. Turns out that it's mercury poisoning is what you're actually giving them, or they're treating them with arsenic or whatever. And then on top of that, you might get pregnant. God forbid, if you get pregnant, there's no way in hell you're gonna make a living, because well, they ain't gonna go unless they're into some weird shit. They're not gonna go bang a pregnant lady when they can go bang a different lady right over here that ain't pregnant. So you got to get rid of that thing. And boy, if you thought abortions are pretty gnarly today, I can't even imagine what it looked like back in 1880s. Good Lord. So, and in the meantime, the respectable jobs that were around for women was, a cook or doing the laundry or something, but they didn't pay jack shit. And I guess you got to keep your dignity as you starved to death. And it was kind of a rough deal. But there was some solutions to it, and like the widow and the girls just running away and stuff was a real legitimate issue, because you're happily married, you're 5-10 years into your marriage, and all you've known is keeping house and raising children. All of a sudden your horse or your husband gets kicked in the head with a horse and it kills him, and you're out west, nowhere near next to kin. You don't have any money because you put it all into your homestead, and all of a sudden you can't do the farm work, and you can go, wash laundry, do laundry, and eventually just starve to death along with your kids, or you can bite the bullet and go give a bead or two, and then it was a rough deal. And for as much shit as the Mormons get on the polygamy, that was one of their rationales behind it. Was you could marry one of these widows, and in their belief in the Mormon faith, there is that you could baptize your dead ancestors after the fact, and still and they could still receive their place in heaven or whatever. In the meantime, you could have church elders that would take the widow of one of the other church elders as their wife, and that meant at least somebody was there to kind of somewhat take care of them, because, as I said, the option for women back in those days was pretty limited. And for as demonized of a practice as polygamy was, there is some instances where it made decent sense. And I guess to close it out, I found a really, really profound quote. And it was from a madam in San Francisco. And it was, actually found this, it was a couple feminists that wrote it. But it was pretty interesting, I gotta say. It was about the first organized protest of in favor of sex workers, prostitutes, or whores, or hookers, however you want to call them. But it was Reggie Gibson was the name of this madam, and it was January 25th, 1917. And the city of San Francisco had decided they were going to outlaw all vices, and that included the painted ladies, the wiggling your bean, cutting the cards, all that good stuff. Scare up a poke, any of those old euphemisms. They were going to get rid of that. Painted ladies were gone, and in protest, they organized about 200 of these sporting gals, and this was Sunday morning, and they marched down to, let's see, where we. There was, I guess, in 1916, there was a bombing that was a bombing that took place. There was a group of union members. I don't know if they were on strike or what, but anyway, there was a big to do between unions and the Chamber of Commerce, and there ended up being a bombing, and there's a bunch of political unrest. And they were really worried about socialism. Socialism was really ramping up, and so they were really leery of these union members and the labor movement. And anyhow, to couple with that, they're just trying to clear out the city and just clean it up. So they're getting rid of these. They were getting rid of all the brothels, and it was technically illegal, but had just never been enforced at all. And I guess how a lot of these cities would operate, these marshals, and in lieu of shutting them down or anything, they would just fine them, and that was basically a way of taxing them, or they'd make them buy permits or something. But that way they could at least get something, say they did something, and but they didn't have to actually shut down the brothels, because they probably had just a straight up fucking mutiny on their hands. You got a bunch of cowboys with blue balls, and then you take away their painted ladies. Shit's gonna hit the fan. So there was a bunch of ministers, preachers, that organized this deal they called Purity Sunday, and that was, they were gonna all just bitch and moan about the evils of prostitution and the sins of the flesh. And Reggie Gibson and another madam, and about Reggie Gamble, not Reggie Gibson, Reggie Gamble, Maud Spencer. They were from the Uptown Tenderloin district. I'm not sure where that's at, but anyway, they were gonna go right at the head of this Purity Sunday movement, and they busted into Reverend Smith. What is his first name? Paul Smith. And they stomp in to his church when he's delivering the sermon, whatever. 200 of these whores just marching in. And Reggie Gamble, I could have swore that said Reggie Gibson. The other place I saw it. Maybe not. I guess it doesn't matter too much. But the quote that and this is what she said to the preacher, and I thought it was pretty interesting. It said, "You want your city cleaned up around your church, but where do you want the women to go? Have you made any arrangement by which they can make their living elsewhere? Why don't you go to the big business houses? Why don't you go up to the legislature and change the conditions? Men here in San Francisco say they want to eradicate vice. If they do, they better give up something of their dividends and pay the girls' wages so they can live. You won't do anything to stop vice by driving us women out of the city to some other city. Has your city and your church a different God that you drive evil away from your city and your church to other cities and other churches? If you want to stop prostitution, stop the new girls from coming in here. They are coming into it every day. They will always be coming into it as long as the conditions, wages, and education are as they are. You don't do any good attacking us. Why don't you go attack those conditions? And she makes a really, really good point. And as I was saying earlier, one of the reasons I really like Nevada is just kind of how it seems like civilization hasn't quite caught up in most of the state. You know, you have Reno and Vegas, but the rest of Nevada is still kind of Old West. And it's the whole theme of Lonesome Dove. You're always looking for new country, and you're always wanting to get there before the lawyers and the politicians fuck it up. And in the early days of the Old West, you know, the whores were looked down upon and they were chastised and whatever, but they were allowed to make a living because they viewed it as a necessary evil. And at the same time, what else were they going to do? There's only so many launderers you can have, and they don't make shit anyways. And just a lot of those women didn't have any other skill to offer. They had nothing. And and then here you go with you know, you got a bunch of rugged individualists. You got people like Kit Carson and you know, Teddy Blue Abbott, and you know, any number of the Old West legends that helped settle. You know, they're out pushing forward, doing you know, cutting trails and building cities because that's what they wanted to do, because they wanted to be the first one out there. They wanted to see something new, build something new. And then, you know, several years later, here come along with all the church-going folk, and not that the people that pushed forward initially weren't church-going, but I guess technically they weren't church-going, but they God-fearing. But then you get like the real religious zealots that come in, you know, 10, 20 years later, and they're appalled by these evil institutions that have been getting by, you know, just chugging along by and large, fairly peacefully, still looked down upon. And, you know, it was a good way of keeping some of the townsmen in line, because somebody saw you walking out of the sporting house. Well, probably that word's going to get back to your wife, and you're going to have a little bit of trouble at home. So maybe you just stay down at the gambling hall where they don't have any of the painted ladies, and then that's where you don't get in as much trouble there. I don't know. It just seems like by having them there, they've got the stigma, just because it's always been a stigma on prostitution. But hey, it's a way to make a living, and of course here in Nevada, it's a legal way to make a living. So be it. But you get rid of it, probably didn't cut down on the prostitution a whole lot. It just went underground. And the ones that didn't want to break the law openly break the law and risk enforcement. Now they moved on to menial jobs, or they marry out to somebody they don't necessarily want to, but what else choice do they have? And yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things. It's an interesting topic. I could go on about that for a while, but I don't know. It's amazing how it was kind of all over the United States, even back east, and it was just kind of kind of gone. It kind of seemed like it left the scene right along the same time as Prohibition, and unlike Prohibition, it just never got re-legalized or whatever. Even though, I guess a lot of states it wasn't actually legal, but it goes away, and it's almost Nevada's just kind of a throwback. It's just something you make a joke about anymore. But I don't know. There's kind of crazy. I'm trying to talk my wife into going with me to the whorehouse to have a drink, just to say that I've had a beer in a whorehouse, but she's probably not going to allow it. But I'm working on it. We'll see. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed this. A lot of sex talk, but interesting. It was a big part of the Old West, and was also a requested topic. So there you go. Whores and Biscuits 2021. That's my official motto. Make sure you go. Before I forget, I've got to throw a big shout out to Mr. Nick Schilling, donated to the show. I appreciate you very much, man. He's got an AI business. He's in, I'm not sure if he's in Sandhills, somewhere in Nebraska, but he's got he does some AI work, and so if you're in that area and you need some of that done, look him up on Facebook, Nick Schilling. He's been a listener to the show, big supporter, and thanks, Nick. I appreciate it. Make sure you go follow all the sponsors. Check them out. Go follow all the social media stuff at Move Your Ass or Burning Daylight. On, just search me up. You'll find me on pretty much all of them. And go check out the website, burning-daylight.com. Trying to build that into something cool. It's getting there. We're starting to get some traffic, and we got some content. Working on more. We're always looking for more stuff. So, you got anything else you'd like to see? Shoot me a message. See what we can do. And January 29th, Stage Door, Elko, Nevada, 7 p.m. Bull Session will go live. Sam McHugh, Jake Houston, Matt and Rachel Wilson, Wampus Cat, and Wes McKinley and myself will all be performing a show, Bull Session, do some poetry, we'll do some jokes, play some music, and it's going to be a grand old time. 7 to 9, there'll be an open jam afterwards. So if you're in the area, or if you're not and you want to be, get your ass to the Stage Door January 29th. And on that note, move your ass. We're burning daylight.